Hello everyone, we're going to try this again with this sew along. I hope I have fixed the sound. All right, we are here for the sew along for the Lauren. I hope you can hear me, that I've got the sound fixed. Give us 1 second, sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm just giving you all a moment to jump on and to confirm that my sound is working for you and you can hear me okay. We can hear you now, yay, wonderful, thank you all. I'm so sorry that that was a little crazy. So this is live, so things like that might happen, so I apologize. And I thank you all for sticking with it. I am having mic issues that may be happening throughout this. But I want to keep going and I want to sew. So if I cut out at any moment, just shoot it in the comments or someone on the social media team is going to let me know, hey, your mic is cutting out. So just bear with us today and I'm so sorry that happened. Okay. All right. So, so now all that happened. For this sew along, we're going to make the Lauren top. So you want to make sure that you have your Ditto on and calibrated, and you should have your sewing machine. This is an event for anyone who has at least done some sewing. Beginners are welcome, but if you are a beginner and you're falling behind, that is okay. We're going to record this and post this later, so you'll be able to look at it later and sew with us at your own pace. And again, I might have some mic issues, so hang tight with any technical difficulties I have. And if you have any technical difficulties, again, this is going to be recorded and you can jump on and watch it whenever you would like to. All right, and as we go, feel free to put questions in the chat and I will check them. I will also continue to check that my sound is doing okay. All right, so let's get started. We're going to jump on to our cutting space and lay out our fabric. All right, so I have my space here. You want to make sure that your Ditto is on. I just have a piece here because I wanted to make sure it was on, but make sure you are calibrated and on, and let's lay out our fabric. We are going to lay this fabric out on the fold. We are cutting on the fold. So take a moment to get this laid out on your space. And we are going to start with piece, we're going to just go in order. So let's bring in piece number 1. All right. So I have piece number 1 there. All right, and we want to make sure that we are all smoothed out and that this piece, we want to make sure we are all smoothed out and that this piece is on the fold, like that. All right. I'm also going to turn off my lights, so give me 1 moment. Make this a little bit easier for you all to see. Great. Okay, so piece number 1 is laid out on the form. I'm happy with how my piece is laying out, so I can start cutting. Okay, and remember that before you remove your piece, you want to mark your notches. And I like just pull mine up as I mark just to get that other side there. Another way to mark your notches is you can project this piece again and lay it out. But this is certainly the easiest way, and if you just fold it over a little bit, you're not pulling it away too much that you won't be able to see. If any of you took a moment to look at the instructions for this top before getting started, there is a note about a side zipper. So if you have a low stretch knit, you might need to put a side zipper in, which is what these notches are here. But I said, as we were setting this sew along up, that we should do a stretchy knit, and that's generally what you would use for this top. So if you have a stretchy knit, no need to follow that side zipper notation in the measurement, or excuse me, in the instructions. But if you're following along with me, you also don't need to worry about it because I'm telling you about it. All right, so notches are marked. I also like to mark my center front, which on both the top and the bottom, which isn't notated on here. But those are really helpful. This top one's especially helpful for when we put a neckband on there. All right, so front piece is cut. And we are going to now make sure that's selected so it's red. We're going to clear piece 1, mark that we cut piece 1 on the fold, and let's bring piece 2 in. I'm also going to use this moment to bring in my facings because they are small enough. All right, great. So both those facings fit in, and piece number 2, I'm going to send that to the projector. Great, there they are. All right. So same thing, we are cutting this on the fold. All right, there we go, smooth on the fold. I can get my weights out. And I'm going to start cutting this back piece. If you're someone who cuts with scissors, you can also cut this with scissors. You just want to make sure you keep your scissors and your fabric as low on this mat as possible so you get this really accurate line. Again, marking the center front, or center back, excuse me, on this back piece and making sure I get my notches marked. Okay, and I'm ignoring these because we're not doing any kind of zipper. All right, and let's get these facings cut. Okay, now I find with these facings that, like, they have these little notches, and 2 notches means the back, 1 notch means the front here. But if that is not enough for you, you can always put like a little F somewhere. It's always helpful to do extra markings on your garment as you work instead of less. You can't have too many markings. All right, so I've got 2 of my facings cut of each the front and the back, and I've got my back now cut as well, which I already took part. So last thing we want to do is cut these flounces. So I can select all on my workspace. I'm going to clear that. I'm also going to take a moment and check off the pieces that I cut. Oh, yep. Yes, I cut 2. Great. All right, so let's bring in these ruffles. And again, we're going to do these one at a time. If you're the type of person that wants to move around, feel free. But I'm trying to make this as easy as possible since this is our first one. Okay, and there is that first ruffle. If you're cutting like me and you are cutting all of this down the center of the fabric, you can always find use for the other pieces there, because this, especially if your fabric is wide like mine's 60 inches wide, there's a lot of excess over here that we won't be using. So you can probably make something else out of that, which is pretty cool. All right, so my back ruffle, waist ruffle is in place. I'm happy with the placement. I'm going to get my weights out. And I'm going to start cutting. All right, and like I said, I always love to mark that center back, which is on this one, and I'm going to put a tiny B because there's no other markings on this to note that this is the back ruffle. So you do whatever you like to use as a marking, but that works for me. Okay, so this back one is good to go. And let's move on to the last one. Again, make sure it is red. We're going to clear that. We cut off that one, so let's bring in this front piece here. Okay. All right, that feels good for this front one. Okay. Front piece is cut. I'm putting a little mark on the center front. I don't know if I said this before or not, but marking tools is a choice of yours. Sometimes I just use a plain pencil because it generally washes out of things. You can also get those dissolvable fabric markers or chalk, whatever you want to use. Okay. Awesome. So those are all our pieces. I'm going to take a moment and turn my lights back on so you can see everything now that we are done projecting. All right. So in a bit, I'm going to show you how to add a neckband to your top. So if you want to stick around for that, make sure you save this leftover fabric here within arm's reach, because we're going to come back to that. I can also now turn off Ditto, and let's get, oh my goodness, I completely forgot we need to cut our interfacings. Sorry about that, everyone. The sound stuff really threw me off. So while I get this back on, take a moment and just make sure you have all your pieces. I've got my ruffles here. I've got my interfacing pieces, which we're gonna cut the interfacing in a moment. And here are my fronts and my backs. My front and my back there. All right. Sorry about that, everyone. All right, front and back interfacings are on the workspace. I'm just giving my Ditto a second to connect. All right. I'm just taking a moment to set up my Ditto again. Sorry, everyone. All right, we're connecting. All right, let's get right back to this workspace. Well, if anyone had a second where they were behind because they were cutting fabric or anything like that, this is giving you time to catch up. All right, so I've got my two interfacing pieces set on the table. I have this nice lightweight apparel flex interfacing that I really like for knits, just because it's super lightweight and doesn't add any like crunchy bulk to it. So I'm just going to fold this in half like this so I can cut both these at once. Your interfacing might be wider, and so you might fold this a little differently, but I've got mine on there like that. All right. There we go. And now I'm going to get this back in place. Again, that's one of the really cool things about using Ditto to cut out your stuff. If your pieces move, you can always put them back in place to then get those notches that you missed. So I just moved that one, but I moved it back in place. These are my fronts. Here's my backs. That one's not wanting to line up, but I will put it on here, just like that. Okay, great. All right, so now we are done cutting for real. I've got my front and my back facings. I've got my whole garment here ready to go. So now I am actually going to turn on my lights and turn off the projector. Alrighty, so now that we have all that going and I have my iron heating up, which I'm going to bring over to this table so you can see, let's set our interfacings and our our interfacings and our flounces. We're setting our interfacing and our facings on the side. We are setting our flounces away. We're going to come back to those. And we're just going to start with this front piece. So this is my back piece here. This is my front piece. All right, so I'm putting right sides together. And now you're going to pin or clip those however you would like. And we're doing both shoulders and side seams. When I pin, I like to do top and bottom and then work my way through, so I just know that everything's going to match up the way it's supposed to, and it all fits into place. And how many pins or clips is up to you, but I am all set, so let's finally move to the sewing machine. All right, everyone. So I've got my sewing machine here. If you are someone who has a serger and you want to sew this on your serger, please do. But I wanted to do our first sew along with just a sewing machine because that's something that we all have. So we're going to sew these knits on a sewing machine. And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have your stitch set to a zigzag. I also have a stretch needle in my machine. You can use a universal needle, but a stretch needle does help a little bit. It goes between these fibers instead of like cutting through those kind of stretchy threads. So a stretch needle is really helpful, but again, a universal needle in your machine is great. Whenever I sew knits, I like to have a little piece of scrap laying around just so I can look at what my stitches are going to be and kind of check it before I keep going. So right now I have my Singer Heavy Duty set to a zigzag, and it is 1.5 wide and my length is 3. You can set yours to whatever you want it to be. But I find that's like a pretty nice zigzag that stretches pretty well for this project. Okay, so once you have your machine threaded and you have it set on a zigzag, we can start sewing our top. And I'm just going to start with a side seam here. And our seam allowance on this project is 5/8 of an inch. And make sure you backstitch at the end. All right, so that's one side seam done. Again, if you want to do this on the serger, you can send that right through the serger. Just make sure that you are cutting out the appropriate amount. Okay, great. Now we're going to do these shoulder seams. And again, we're doing 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. right, awesome. I'm going to take a moment to clip your threads as well. Keep our project nice and tidy as we go. All right. Okay, cool. All right, so now we have our t-shirt sewn on our side seams and our shoulder seams. So now we are going to move on to our interfacing. Now we're going to move back onto our interfacing, our armholes, and then we will come back to this. So I'm just going to set this aside, and I'm going to bring over my iron, which you can also obviously head over to your iron in place. But what we want to do is we want to iron our interfacing to these pieces. So these are my front facings. I'm going to find my front facings in here, which are these two. I can lay that in place right there. And there, awesome, great. So I'm going to iron these. Take a little bit of steam out. There we go. Okay, so front is done. Let's move on to our back facings. I find with this, this apparel flex interfacing that it really doesn't need much to really get in there. So just a good, nice press with your iron. Okay, great. So now that we have all four of these, we're going to put them together. So we want to put a front and a back together. There we go. These are two backs. There we go. Here's our front. Oh, wait. Back, back, front, and front. There we go. Okay, great. So now once we have our fronts and our backs, we can pin or clip these together. And these will become our shoulder seams and our side seams. Okay, and now we are moving back to the machine. And just like before, we're sewing these seams with a 5/8 seam allowance. we've got one done. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so let's press these open. If you, again, are using a serger, then you're just going to press them to the side. All right, and while I'm here, I'm probably going to just take a minute and press the side seams and shoulder seams of my actual tank since I'm here at the ironing board. Alrighty, so I've got all of these seams ironed, which is great. That's ready to go. And I've got my facings ready to go. And before I want to put it in, I actually want to do just a little bit of a finishing on this edge here. Generally with knits, you can leave this raw, just because knits don't really fray. But I find this interfacing, like because it's interfaced in here, I just want to clean that up a little bit. So if you, oh, we're getting a question. Where can you find apparel flex interfacing? I found it just at Joann Fabrics, just with the other interfacings. It almost looks like a, kind of like a meshy kind of sheer, as you can see here. But it's called, I don't know the exact name, but I believe it's like apparel flex interfacing is in it. I will actually look that up. But thank you, Debbie, for that question, and hopefully you can find it. But yeah, at Joann's, I'm sure if you ask them as well, say I'm sewing with knits, I really want a lightweight apparel interfacing, they'll be able to show that to you. It's slightly different than that like cotton iron-on. It's really nice. All right, so how I was going to finish these edges just on this outside that's going to be loose in our top is I'm just going to do a zigzag. And like I said, if you have a serger, you can totally do a serger. And I'm going to make my width a bit longer than my length and my width. So right now I'm setting my width at a 4 and my length at a 4, just to get like a little kind of edge on here. And I'm not folding anything over, I'm just going around the outside. This is kind of like a mock serger type of setting here. it just gives you this like little zigzag on the edge here that's just going to keep everything from fraying and moving around in your shirt. So I'm going to do that on that one, and now I'm going to do it on the other. Oh, sorry if I lost my mic for a second, I apologize. I don't know how long my mic was out, so I hope that I answered Debbie's question about the interfacing and being able to get that at Joann's. But now I am just doing a zigzag, again at 4 width, 4 length, just still add a little bit of an edge. Okay, red's clipped, get this all cleaned up, out of the way. All right, and now I'm going to head back over to the table because we are going to set these into our sleeves. Put that out of the way. Okay, so to set in these armholes, what we want to do is, with the right sides facing together, so you're going to set this in here like this, and just make sure that I'm putting the correct sides together. Look for my notches. Here we go. This is the back. This is the front. All right, so that's going to sit in like this. And what I want to do is I like to start at my underarm just to get those seams matched up there. Put a clip. And now do another one up here at the shoulder seam. And then I can work my way around. And as you can see, it should fit in there real nicely. You want to check for your notches and make sure your notches get matched up as well. And I'm just working my way around this armhole. Okay, and that's one. So you see that fits in really nicely. So let's do the other armhole. And I'm going to start at the bottom here. Great. So tops and bottoms are done, and now I'm working my way through, starting with those notches down here. Okay. Alrighty, so this is what it should look like once you have all your armholes set into place. So let's go stitch this. I like to, if your machine has a drawer, I like to remove it whenever doing anything with sleeves or armholes. You want to take that off just in case, because it just makes it so much easier to work around this. It doesn't matter where you start, but I tend to start on one of these seams. So I'm starting at the underarm here. And again, we're sewing with 5/8 seam allowance. Oh, make sure if you didn't change your settings back to our stitching settings that you do that now. We want that smaller zigzag that we had for all our seams there. I find when I sew with these clips, sometimes they get caught as you go around. So sometimes pins are better, but I do really love these clips, especially for knits. Make sure you clip your threads. And this is a great time to clip this armhole. So we want to make sure that we are clipping this curve so it lays really nice. So I like to use some smaller scissors just to get a little more detail in there. But take your time with this clipping. As you get in some of the straighter area, you don't necessarily need as much or as close. All right, almost there. You don't want to rush your clipping because if you go too far, it's really hard to come back from. So you want to make sure that you get as close as you can to these stitches without going through. All right, so that armhole is clipped and sewn. So now I want to work on this other armhole. So again, setting this in the machine, I'm going to start with an underarm. And you see here, knits sometimes move on you, so you want to make sure that you are paying attention, that you don't get any pieces that kind of gather on each other. With that, you can always lift your foot and readjust. If you're getting a lot of that, if you're getting a lot of your fabric pushing and pulling, you might need to adjust the tension on your machine. Sometimes when we sew knits, we need slightly different tension than when we are sewing our regular woven fabrics. Okay, great. So now this one's sewn, and I'm going to take a moment to do all my clipping. Okay. So let's just go around and clip all this. And see these, I didn't get quite as close as I'd like, so I'm just going to go back in and get a little bit closer The closer you get without going through is going to give you that nicer curved underarm there. Like I said, we can do a little bit less as we get up into the straighter part of this arm. All right, and then now as we're getting more into this curve, I'm just going to make sure I get as close as I can. All right. Okay, so now that we are clipped, we want to press this into place. So I'm going to start by ironing this with all this clipping towards my interfacing here. Oh, watch out for that. And I'm just working around my armholes. Giving that a quick press. All right. So the reason you press everything to one side is that when you fold this, it just naturally now wants to lay underneath. So now that I've got that pressed, I'm just going to go and press this again and make sure it's laying where I want to in here. And you're going to have to keep moving it around your ironing board to get a good position. We're going to put a stitch in this arm next, so that's why you want to really take your time and make sure this is all sitting where you want before we move on to that step. So I'm happy with that armhole. There we go. My top is a little bit all wrapped up in itself. Okay, so that one's all done. So now let's move on to this one. Again, with the right sides out. I'm going to press all this clipping towards my interfacing there. All right, my clipping's pressed. I can turn both of these right side out again. And you'll see right now this is just flopping out. That is okay. We're going to fix that in a moment, so don't worry about that quite yet. So now here is my armhole getting into place there, and I'm going to give this a good press. Okay, so both of these arms are now pressed into place. So now we are going to understitch them. I'm going to move to the machine to show you that. Okay, So understitching, if you don't know, is when you stitch all this seam allowance to the underneath side, the facing side of your garment, and that way it holds it in place. So we are going to start, you can either stitch with it like this, so you can see the seam allowance as you sew. I actually like to sew mine just on the top of this facing, so I can see this line that I'm sewing and I can make sure it looks really nice. And because I ironed all that seam allowance to this side anyway, to the facing side, like I know it's underneath and I can feel for it as I go. So to understitch, we're going to make sure all of our seam allowance is underneath this facing side. I like to line up the foot of my my sewing machine to that seam line that we had sewn before, and I'm just going to kind of watch for that to make sure that I get an even stitch. You can stitch this with a straight stitch or with your zigzag. And again, I'm just feeling as I go with this hand that all the seam allowance is on that side of my garment as I sew. Okay. So now this is what it's going to look like on the underneath, and this is what it looks like on the viewable side of your garment on the inside. So you've got this nice little stitch all the way around. While we're here, we can also tack this in place. So we want this facing to not pop out as we're wearing the garment. So this is going to get tacked here, and you can either do that by hand or you can grab a pin. If you're going to do this on machine, I don't suggest using a clip for this step just because it's nice to get something in here. So I'm going to hold this flat on top of there. You can see how it falls nicely and matches up. And I'm just going to put a little pin in here. And I'm pinning to the seam allowance, not to the garment. So that's not being pinned through, just there. And once I have that pin in there, I can pull my fabric out of the way, so I'm just exposing the seam allowance, and I can set it in the machine. And that's a way to do just a little tack of that facing down on your machine. You can also easily do that by hand, which is really easy as a beginner, just to do that with a little hand tack. So you want to do that on the shoulder seam and underneath on this arm's eye. And you can see I'm holding it against my machine. It's nice to have a flat surface when trying to figure out where this lands. So that wants to sit right there. And I'm going to put a little pin in it. There we go. So that's pinned in place. Now I can tack this by pulling that fabric away, getting my hand out of the way and my pin out of the way. And doing just a little tack there. So now this arm is completely done. It's tacked at the top and the bottom, and it's understitched. So I'm going to do all those steps again on this other arm. So we want to start with our understitching. So I'm sliding this in the machine. I'm starting at the underarm point, but it doesn't really matter. And I'm making sure that my clipping is all towards that facing. And I'm just working around this armhole. Okay, so that is in place. So last step we want to do is just tacking our facings at the two seams. So I got that one pinned in place. I'm now going to set this into my machine, pulling the fabric out of the way. Okay, so that's all. Oh, one more thread. That's all in place, and now last one is this this side seam here. So I want to get that all laying in place. I want to grab my seam allowance and the facing with a pin. Again, feel free to tack this by hand if you prefer. Okay, just a little machine tack there. Clipped my threads. And now our underarms and our whole sleeve is done and faced, so we're ready to move on. All right, so now we have the top part done, and we are going to move on to adding our flounce. So the first thing we want to do is stitch our flounce pieces together. So this is my back flounce. And this is the front flounce. So we're going to lay these together, and we're putting these two side seams together. So take a moment to pin or clip these side seams. Okay, and let's go stitch this on the machine. Just like we've been doing, we want to set this in on a zigzag 5/8 of an inch in. Great, and I'm going to clip my threads. And now let's move on to this other side seam on this flounce. clipping these threads again. Okay, let's give this a press. Okay, so now we have this flounce all ready, which is super cute. Get some threads out of the way. And we want to attach this to the bodice. So one of them you can do right sides out, the other wrong side out, and we're going to put this inside. So this is my back flounce, and this is my back flounce. So I'm going to put this in here like this, and now I can start matching all this up. So I'm going to start with a side seam. It's always easiest. Okay, and then I'm going to work on this other side seam. Okay. And this is where I told you to put those little markings on your centerfold, because now you have another place to match up your pieces. Okay, and same thing with the back here. I can find that little notch that I marked and find it on my garment or on my bodice here and match it there. So now I have a really good starting point to do all this. So now I can go around and just start setting this all in place. And then last little quadrant here of clips. Okay, there we go. So now we have this flounce right sides together, all pinned. So let's take this to the machine. Okay. This is a place that if you were sewing with a straight stitch or anything, you really want to bring out the zigzag, because this is going horizontally around the body, so you want as much stretch as possible on this seam. If you've been sewing a zigzag like me, the one we had set should work just fine. And same 5/8 inch seam allowance. We are dealing with a lot more fabric that we're setting around, and they're two different shapes, so take your time here stitching and making sure that nothing gets caught underneath as you sew, and you kind of have to like move these gathers around, or move this flounce around here, like get that out of the way. you notice when I sew, I like to try to keep my finger underneath here as I move, and that way I can feel for if this t-shirt is ever getting caught or going to head into the needle in the wrong way. Magnetized scissors. Okay. So now I have got this all sewn, and you can see it's pretty stretchy for a waist. So this is a great seam that if you were to do this on the serger would be even better, but because we're doing this whole thing on a sewing machine, this is really great, nice and stretchy. Alrighty. So last step before we hem this, so you can hem this with just a zigzag, but I'm going to show you how to finish this neckline with a neckband. So I'm going to do that first and then get to the hem. So let's head over to the table and I'll show you this neckband. Alright, just got to get that out of the way there because we're going to do some cutting. Alright, so to add a neckband to this top, you can always, if you don't want to do the neckband, you can always just fold this under 5/8 of an inch and do a zigzag all the way around. But I think the neckline looks really professional and really nice and easy to finish. So the first thing you're going to do is we want to measure what this opening is. So I just start at any point that I need to. And I'm just working my way around, and I'm making sure not to pull the neckline as I measure. You can also measure on your pattern. Like if you have your pattern projected, you could just measure those lines. I like to get to one step at a time. So we're on to the neckline here. So I'm just measuring this. All right, and that on mine is measuring 36.5. Now, if you're doing one of the other rounded necklines, it's going to be a lot smaller, so don't go off my measurements. So take your own. Mine's at 36. I will note that we are doing, this is just works on one of the scoop or round neck. If you're trying to do a V-neck or a square, there's a slightly different way of setting in the neckline. So this is just for the round or the scoop neck. So 36.5 is my measurement here. And to cut a neckband, I want it slightly smaller than this neck hole. Anywhere from 70 to 90% of that number, which it depends on your fabric and how much you want that to be sunken in. I've been finding on this pretty stretchy fabric I've got that 90% works well. So I'm going to do the math. So mine is coming out to 32.85. I'm going to round that down to 32 3/4 just to keep my life easy. Again, that number is flexible. And if you cut it at a bigger size, like that 90% of that number, you can always cut it down too. So it's always good to start big. So I'm going to cut this at 32 3/4. This is where you want to get that fabric back out that we had. All right, and I don't need to cut this on the fold, so I'm gonna open this up. Well, I'm gonna take this on the nice bottom edge here, just to make my life a little easier. I've got lots of this left over that I'll do something cool with later. Okay, so you want your neckband to be on the cross grain so that you get the most stretchy part possible. And I want to make sure that I have a nice fresh edge. Okay. And I'm going a little bit longer. Just get that out of there. Okay. Going to now mark this. So here's here. So my ruler is 24 inches, so I can do a little 24-inch mark here. And then I want to continue on my fabric. And hopefully you have slightly bigger of a space. You don't have an ironing board that you can really lay this out and do this all in one cut here. Okay, so I said 32 3/4. Right now we're at 24 to make it easy. There we go. 32 is going to be right here, and then I'm going to add just 3/4. So that is, in theory, my neckband that I'm going to start with. So I'm going to move this onto my cutting surface like so. Okay, and for a neckband, you could do anywhere from 1.5 inches to 2 inches wide. So the length is 90% of your t-shirt. The width is 2 inches or 1.5 inches. I'm going to do mine at 2 inches just to keep it easy, and that's the length of my ruler. Great. And I had this little mark where I started. Okay, so this in theory is my neckband. I can get my fabric out of the way. And what I want to do now is just double check this. So a great way to double check it is fold that in half, fold your neckline in half, like this. And I just want to hold this against here, and I just want to confirm that this is slightly smaller here, which it is. It's got a little bit here, and I'm going to take even more off with my seam allowance, so that should be good. That should fit nicely. I want it to be a little bit smaller. Okay, so now that I have that in place, and I'm happy with my neckband, I'm going to fold this in half like this, and we're going to take this to the machine and just stitch across right there. Okay. So I am here, and all I'm doing is that same little zigzag. You could do a little less. You don't necessarily need to do 5/8 of an inch. I usually do like a 1/2 inch little seam allowance, or when I'm doing this on the serger, just serge it closed. clip our threads. Okay. And back to our table. Bring my ironing board back into place. All right, and I'm just going to iron this little seam open. Okay, and now I'm going to iron this in half. So I'm just going to work around. Okay, great. So now I have a neckband that I'm ready to attach to my shirt. So what I want to do is I want to break down both my neckline and my shirt into 4 quadrants, kind of like how we did on the bottom here. So we already have these marked, but we need to find the center of those. So I'm putting my front together and my back together just like this. And then I'm going to fold them again so that that front center seam, or the front center fold and the back center fold are matching up. And when I get back here, now I can mark this point here. It's a little hard to show, but basically I'm folding my garment neckline into 4 sections. So we've got center and back right here. We've got these off center from the shoulder seam up here. And that means this is the neckline in 4s. So if I open this back up, I now have a point here, 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 which is just a few, it's like about 2 inches a front of my shoulder seam, and here. And I'm going to make this one just a little bit stronger so I can see it. Okay, so I'm going to set that aside, and now I want to do the same thing on this neckband. I want to get 4 equal parts. So I'm folding this in half like that, and I'm going to put just a little mark on the neckband on the inside where I won't see it, and then I'm going to fold it again so that back and front match up, and I'm going to fold this out of the way and put a little mark on each part of this neckband. However you can get that in there. Okay, so now I know I have all my marks in here, so now I want to just match all of this up. I like to make it easy on myself and put this seam of this neckband on the center back, but you could adjust all your marks so that you could put this seam on a shoulder, whatever you think is best for you, but for me, I really like it just on that center back to make it easy to match up my marks. So now I'm just going to go around and make sure I match up all these marks with the 4 marks I put in this neckband. And it may feel a little weird, like because the neckband is smaller than this neckline, but we're going to disperse all of that very soon. I'm just working around. Here's my last mark right there, and a mark right there. Okay, great. So now you can see as we move around, your t-shirt is a little bit looser than this neckband, and that's exactly what we want. So what we want to do is just pull tightly, or pull a little bit as as we go, and you're just pulling the neckband until the shirt matches up with it. So you see it's loose, and then I pull it and it's tight. So now I'm going to work my way around, just pulling slightly and lining up all of these raw edges. Same thing on each quadrant. Pull slightly and pin. Oop, this is caught. Make sure that doesn't happen. Pull and pin. And then this back section, we are pulling and matching everything up, just where it wants to go. And if you find in this step that your neckband is bigger, than your t-shirt, then you should recut your neckband because you want it to be a little bit smaller. If you feel like it's too small and you're getting gathers in your t-shirt, you're going to want to recut it as well. So what we want is just a slight difference. Okay, so I've got this whole neckband now pinned in there, so now I'm going to stitch that. And this is a time where if you don't have the drawer off your machine, you want to take that off again because you're going around this curve. Doesn't matter where you start. I tend to start just at a seam. And for this one, I'm just using my foot as a mark for seam allowance. We didn't really mark a seam allowance on this neckband since it's an addition to this top and not in the instructions. You could do 5/8 of an inch, but I'm just doing this little, it's ending up to be about 3/8 of an inch. So I'm just working my way around, stitching this neckband in place. And I'm just pulling slightly as I sew so that everything lays nice and smooth as it goes through the machine. All right, so now I have this neckband on here. All right, so here is how this neckband looks currently. So this is flipping up, but you can see it's starting to be a finished edge. So what we want to do is take a minute and just iron this in place. And we want to iron our seam allowance down towards the garment. So it's going to go the whole time away from this neckline. And if you're doing this scoop like me, it's gonna fight you a little bit down here, but that's okay because we're gonna take care of that in a little bit. Okay, so that neckband is now ironed in place. So now this is when we're going to pull out those twin needles. All right, here's what the band looks like close up right now. Ooh. Hold on. Sorry about that. My machine is sewing by itself. All right. That is okay because we are going to use those twin needles now that I mentioned. So these are twin needles. They basically make two stitches of lines, or 2 lines of stitching on your garment at once in your sewing machine. If you've ever seen like the finished edge of a t-shirt, you'll see those 2 lines. So we're going to create that now on our sewing machine, and the only thing you need extra is a set of these needles and a second set of spool of thread. So the first thing I'm going to do is undo this needle. Okay, get that in place. It just sets in just like your normal needle. And then I added a second spool of thread to the top of my machine. So your machine usually comes with a second spool holder, and there's a little hole, usually in the upper right of your machine. So I'm going to set that in place, set my thread in there, and now I'm going to thread my machine normally, but with 2 sets of threads. So I'm just going to bring them through like this until I get to the bottom here. And this is when I'm going to split them. And I usually make, if I have any excess, I will cut that here, get that out of the way. And I usually tug on one to see which one it is, because I want to make sure that whatever spool is on the left stays in the left needle, whatever spool on the right stays in the right needle. So I pulled these in place, so now I can just thread this like I would. Threading needle number 1. If you have an automatic threader on your machine, it will not work for this, just because these needles are in a different position. Okay, so that is threaded. I'm also going to take a moment and check my bobbin since I had that moment of crazy sewing. All right, reset my bobbin into place. Okay, now before you sew anything, if you were sewing on a zigzag, you need to take that away because you're going to break your needle. So I'm setting this back onto a regular straight stitch, and I'm going to take my little piece of tester fabric and make sure that it is sewing properly and the tension is good. So you can see these are the double lines that makes. I'm happy with this, so now we can sew this neckline. So we are going to set this in the machine. I'm going to start center back here. And we're setting our machine end needles just below the neckline. So again, I'm using the stitch line of my neck as a guide for my foot. And I'm setting this down, and I'm going to just sew 2 lines all the way. And what I want to make sure is that the seam allowance of this neckline is going towards the garment, and I'm catching it with those stitches. our neckline is complete. All right, so that's what that looks like, which is really nice, really pretty. So we're going to give this a press, and then we're going to move on to this hem. Okay, holding that all into place. Got this nice, pretty finished neckline. All right, so neckline is completely done. It's a super nice finished neckline. And now we're going to work on this hem. If you have a serger, you may want to serge this edge right now, or if you have a cover stitch machine, you could do this on a cover stitch. The simplest way, you can fold this up 5/8 of an inch and you can do a zigzag. I'm going to fold this up 5/8 of an inch and use those twin needles to do that same finish that I just did on the neckline. Now this is, because it's rolled, you're going to get some little gathers as you go, so just take your time ironing this into place. You can use a hem ruler. I just like to occasionally just check it as I go, so then I can get in here and iron all of that curve into place. You could also pin this all the way around and then iron it, but I find with especially like a knit like this, it kind of sticks to itself once you get it into place. Yeah, we're hemming like a full circle right now, so this is going to take some time. But if you were hemming like a regular t-shirt, you would be able to do this quite quickly. So just take your time right now to get this all pressed up. Okay. You could be pinning as you go as well. Like on something like this, because it kind of sticks to itself and that fold kind of stays there, I like to do an initial press and just get it in place and then use my clips to hold it in place as I stitch. Almost there. And as you can see, I occasionally don't measure as I go, and I've gotten really good at eyeballing 5/8 of an inch. But that's when a hem ruler would come really in handy to kind of get this all measured. You can measure that with that, or use any kind of clear ruler will be really helpful in getting this all pressed up evenly. Okay, I'm at the end of this circle here, so I'm just going to take a moment and put a few clips around just to hold it as I'm going to be sewing it. On this fabric, the press is really holding it nicely, so you can see my hem is just falling right back into place here where I ironed it. If you get to any places where it feels like it's popping up, you can give that another little press as you go. And you can see I'm not clipping or pinning, like I'm clipping kind of far because this is pressed into place. It's just to hold it as I go. My iron or my hem is kind of already set in by that iron. Okay, now it's clipped. I'm going to take this to the machine. Oh, Lynn, thank you. Yes, I'm glad that I can share some of my techniques. I hope it adds something to your already known skills in sewing. Love a good neckline, love a quick hem. We did pick a project that has the longest hem ever, this circle, so I appreciate you all sticking around. Thank you. Oh, neckline is beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, now you can all do these beautiful necklines. All right, so for this hem, we're on the last step. Yay. I'm going to use these twin needles. Just keep on going. You can also just use a zigzag, but we have this pressed like this. And I like to sew, whenever I do a hem, I try to sew it, if possible, on the right side of the fabric, especially with knits when using these twin needles, because then I can see the stitching. Also, you'll see in a moment the twin needles they look better on the top than they do on the back. So you want to make sure this is on the right side of your fabric. And because I know 5/8 is facing, or 5/8 is my seam allowance, I'm going to make sure I match up my hem just a slight bit less than that. So somewhere between 1/2 inch and 5/8 on my machine, just so I'm catching the edge of the seam allowance, but I'm not going too far close to my hem. So I'm just going to work my way around here. And I can show you here. So this is what our hem is going to look like. And you can see on the back here, these zigzags. So that's not what you want on the front of your garment. So I'm going to keep working around. I hope you were all working around, or at least just watching. And just take your time here, because some of this fabric, like, because it's a circle, some of it is folded underneath. Got the largest pile of clips over here. Right, maybe we're halfway done. I'm not sure. My gosh, I see the end. We're getting close to it. Okay, great. Okay, and I'm just going to get these threads out of the way because I want this to be a real nice little edge here. That stitch, okay. You see when I got to the end, I made sure to go over the same 2 lines that I had sewn originally. So it's nice and finished there. All right. Oh my goodness. So hem done. Last step here is we just want to give this hem another little press, which I'm going to do real quickly so I can let you all go. This is why I love these twin needles when sewing knits, because you get this really nice flat hem. All right. Oh my gosh, this top is so cute. The hem is taking forever, this little flounce, but it's so worth it because it's a really cute top. And I really love it, and I'm glad that you all picked it out from our poll because it's just so fun. A lot to hem, but so much fun. And it's good practice, practicing hems here. All right, last little bit. Oh my goodness. Okay, we all made a shirt. Very exciting. All right, everyone. I just want to say thank you for joining me, and I hope that you have a top that, ooh, that's the back. Here we go. So this is our little Lauren top. It is super cute with this really adorable neckband that you can now do to any of your knit t-shirts. So I hope you learned something today, and I just wanted to say thank you for joining me on this sew along, and thank you for putting up with the sound issues that we had at the beginning and throughout. I appreciate you sticking through with me. We do have one note that if you are on the fence about purchasing a Ditto, Joann's and Singer are having a promotion right now where if you purchase one, you get $100 store credit. That is based on whether it's Singer or Joann's, so please check the websites for the fine print and the details. It's only for this month. So if you're on the fence, you get a $100 shopping spree when you buy your Ditto. So thank you again. If you have any other questions or comments, you can put them in. Feel free to watch this at your own pace. And I appreciate you all being here with me today. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.